East Starling sailed smoothly through the calm black sea of stars. The broken altar and the drifting station were far behind them now, swallowed by the endless darkness of space. Sarah sat quietly in the cockpit corner, her golden eyes watching them. Stars as they passed. The cube in her hands was now dark and still, no longer glowing with power. She held it gently, as if it were a precious memory. Rafi and Mira exchanged tired glances. The weight of what they had done and what they had stopped settled over them like a quiet storm. Mira finally broke the silence. "We did it. The Veiled One is sealed again." Rafi nodded. "But it feels like this is just the beginning." Sarah looked up, her ears twitching softly. "The cult will not stop. The Keepers believe the power is worth any cost. They will search for another way. For now, they are weakened, but they will return." Rafi sighed. "Then we have to be ready. We can't let them catch us off guard again." Mira tapped a few controls and pulled up a star map. "We should find a safe place to lay low, somewhere far from the usual paths." Sarah's tail curled tightly. Round her legs, there's a place, an old sanctuary hidden in the nebula of shadows. It was once a home for my people. There, we might find allies and knowledge to prepare. The Starling changed course toward the distant nebula, a colorful cloud of dust and gas swirling in space. The journey would take several days, but the crew knew it was necessary. Rafi sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this. Fighting ancient powers and shadow cults." Mira smiled faintly. "Neither did the first, but sometimes the universe chooses for us." Sarah's eyes softened. "You saved me and many others by breaking the altar's chains. My people owe you a debt." Rafi shook his head. "We all did this together." Days passed in quiet travel. The crew shared stories and plans, growing closer with each passing moment. Sarah taught Rafi and Mira about her people's history, their struggles and sacrifices, their fight to protect the galaxy from the Veiled One. One evening, as the nebula's colorful light bathed the ship, Mira approached Sarah. "What happens if the cult finds the sanctuary?" Sarah looked toward the glowing clouds. "Then we fight again. But this time, we will not be alone." Finally, the Starling reached the nebula of shadows. The ship glided through the swirling colors, the stars twinkling faintly beyond the mist. In the heart of the nebula lay a hidden station, ancient but strong, covered in strange symbols that glowed softly. As the ship docked, a group of figures greeted them, tall, noble beings with sharp eyes and calm voices, allies of Sarah's people. Their leader, a wise woman named Kira, welcomed them warmly. "You carry the light of hope. Here, you will find strength to stand against the darkness." The crew settled in, sharing the story of the Eclipse battle and the shattered altar. Kira listened carefully. "You have done well," she said, "but the Veiled One's shadow stretches far. It is not enough to close one gate. We must prepare for the next." Rafi felt a new resolve growing inside him. "Then we'll be ready," Mira added. "We'll stand together." Sarah nodded. "And protect the galaxy from the darkness that waits." Weeks passed as they trained, learned, and prepared. The sanctuary's library held secrets lost to most of the galaxy. The crew studied ancient texts, learned new skills, and formed bonds with their new allies. One evening, Sarah stood before a window, looking out at the stars. Rafi joined her. "You think the cult will come soon?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, but we will meet them with light, not fear." Rafi smiled. "Then I'm glad I'm here." As the Starling prepared for its next mission, the crew made a silent promise to protect each other and the galaxy, no matter the cost. The stars outside seemed brighter now. Filled with hope, the battle was over for now, but the story was far from finished. Ravi kept his hand pressed firmly over the alien woman's wound. Her breathing was shallow, but the bleeding seemed to slow a little under his touch. The strange silver liquid no longer poured out as quickly as before, though it still pulsed faintly against his palm. He knew he had already broken the first rule of alien contact. Never touch unknown blood or wounds without protection. The captain would not be happy. In fact, the entire crew might say he had been foolish. But rules did not matter right now. A life was in front of him, and it was slipping away. The alien woman's golden eyes stayed fixed on him, watching every movement. There was a strange mix in her gaze, surprise, pain, and something he could not name. She spoke again in her language, the words slow and heavy, as if it took great effort to say them. "I don't understand," Ravi said softly, shaking his head. He tried to think. Perhaps if he spoke slowly, she might catch some meaning. I help you," he said, pointing to himself, then to her wound. For a moment, she only stared. Then she made a sound that might have been a weak laugh, or maybe it was just her trying to breathe. She closed her eyes briefly, but when she opened them again, there was a faint spark in them. Ravi reached into his pack with his free hand, pulling out a small sealant patch from his medical kit. Normally, it was used for human injuries, a thin, flexible material that stuck to the skin and stopped bleeding. He wasn't sure if it would work on her. Her skin was not like his. It was smooth, almost glass-like, and warmer than any human's. Still, he had to try. He gently lifted his hand from the wound just enough to slide the patch into place. The moment his hand moved, she flinched, a sharp breath escaping her lips. "Easy, easy," he murmured, placing his hand back over the patch to hold it down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, to his relief, the patch seemed to melt slightly, forming a seal over the glowing edges of the wound. The bleeding slowed even more. The woman's head tilted slightly as she looked down at his hand, then back at his face. It was almost as if she was studying him, trying to understand why a stranger would do this. Ravi leaned back just a little, still keeping pressure on the wound. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly, even though he wasn't sure if it was true. He didn't know her biology. He didn't know if her body could heal like a human's. But saying the words made him feel stronger. A sudden noise broke the silence, a low, steady hum in the distance. It was faint at first, but growing louder. Ravi froze, listening carefully. It wasn't the sound of wind or the forest. It was mechanical. The woman's eyes widened in alarm. She tried to push herself upright, but the movement made her grimace in pain. She spoke quickly now, her voice urgent. I don't understand," Ravi said again, frustration in his tone. But then he saw her glance toward the horizon, then back at him, then toward the trees as if urging him to move. Ravi's stomach tightened. Whoever was out there, they weren't friendly to her. He had no proof, but something in her eyes told him this was true. The hum grew louder. Now it was joined by a rhythmic thumping sound, like boots striking the ground. His mind raced. If they found her here, they might take her, or worse. Ravi quickly packed away his kit, leaving the patch in place on her wound. He stood and reached out a hand to her. "Come on, we have to move." She hesitated for a second, looking at his hand as though weighing a decision. Then, with visible effort, she placed her own long, silver fingers in his. Her touch was warm and surprisingly strong for someone so weak. Ravi pulled her to her feet. She leaned heavily against him, her other arm wrapping around his shoulder for balance. He could feel her weight, lighter than he expected, but every step she took was slow and careful. They moved toward a cluster of tall crystal-leaf trees. The ground crunched softly under their boots. Ravi tried to guide her quickly, but she stumbled more than once, and each time he tightened his arm around her to keep her steady. Behind them, the noise was close enough that Ravi could now see faint shapes moving in the distance, dark figures. Too far away to make out clearly, but definitely coming this way. The woman's breathing quickened. She spoke again, a low, sharp word, and gestured for him to hurry. Ravi nodded, helping her push through the last line of trees into a narrow path between two ridges. The path twisted and dipped downward, offering some cover from the view above. Still, the mechanical hum didn't stop. It followed them, steady and relentless. Ravi's legs burned from the effort of half-carrying her, but he didn't slow down. He didn't know where he was leading her, only that they had to get as far from those dark shapes as possible. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached a small clearing hidden deep in the ridge. The hum of engines was muffled here, the sound bouncing strangely off the rock walls. For now, they had a moment to breathe. Ravi guided her to a large, flat stone where she could sit. Her eyes closed briefly, her chest rising and falling in slow, deep breaths. He crouched in front of her. Who are they? Why are they after you? She opened her eyes halfway, meeting his gaze, but she didn't answer in words he could understand. Instead, she touched her chest lightly, then pointed toward the horizon where the shapes had been. Ravi understood only one thing. Danger was coming from that direction, and it would not stop. He tightened the straps on his pack and looked around. They couldn't stay here long. Somewhere beyond the ridges, the sound began again, faint but steady. The hunt wasn't over. Ravi turned back to the alien woman, her golden eyes locked on his. And though they couldn't speak the same language, something passed between them, a silent agreement. They would have to face this danger together. The hidden clearing was silent except for the sound of the alien woman's breathing. Ravi sat on a low rock across from her, watching her carefully. Her head rested against the ridge wall, her silver hair falling over her shoulder. The patch on her wound still glowed faintly, holding the strange liquid inside. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. Her golden gaze met his, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she said something in her language, soft, almost like a whisper. Ravi leaned forward. I don't understand, he said again, but this time his voice was gentle, almost apologetic. The woman studied him. She spoke the same word again, then pointed at her chest. Ravi guessed it might be her name. He tried to repeat the sound, but his tongue struggled with the shape of it. She gave a faint smile, her lips curving just slightly. It was the first smile he had seen from her since they met. Ravi pointed to himself. Ravi, he said slowly, tapping his chest. She tilted her head, then copied him. Ra-vi. Her voice carried a strange music to it, as though the word was more than just a name. They sat quietly for a moment. The wind moved through the crystal leaf trees above the ridge, making a faint ringing sound. Ravi decided to check her wound again. He knelt beside her and gently touched the edge of the patch. The moment his fingers brushed her skin, something unexpected happened. A sudden warmth shot up his arm, not burning, but deep and steady, like a wave of heat from a campfire. In his mind, shapes and colors flashed quickly. He saw a sky filled with silver ships. He saw her, the same woman, standing before a group of tall beings like herself, holding a glowing object in her hands. He felt a rush of urgency, then an image of her ship falling from the sky in flames. Ravi gasped and pulled his hand back. The vision ended instantly, leaving him blinking in confusion. What was that? He murmured. The woman was watching him closely now. She touched her own temple, then lightly touched his wrist. It was as if she was saying, I showed you. Ravi's mind raced. Some kind of memory link. Maybe her species can share thoughts through touch. He had only heard of such things in old space stories, not in real science missions. You were in trouble, Ravi said slowly. You were attacked. She nodded weakly. As though confirming his guess, he thought about the ships in the vision, and the fear he had felt through her. If she had crashed here, and those dark shapes were the ones who brought her down, then they would not stop until they found her. The woman shifted slightly, wincing in pain. Her breathing was heavier now, and Ravi could tell she was still losing strength despite the patch. He took a sip from his water flask, then offered it to her. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, her long fingers wrapped around the flask, and she drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. When she handed it back, she spoke another word. Ravi didn't know the meaning, but the way she said it felt like thank you. The sound of distant engines came again, faint but steady. Ravi's attention snapped toward the ridge opening. The noise was growing louder. They're still looking for you, he said, standing up quickly. The woman's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Ravi looked around. The clearing gave them cover for now, but it had only one exit, the narrow path they had used to enter. If the searchers came this way, they would be trapped. He knelt again, lowering his voice. We have to move. Now, she tried to stand, but her legs trembled beneath her. Without thinking, Ravi slid an arm under hers, lifting her gently to her feet. She leaned against him, and for a moment he felt the same warmth from before. Not the vision, but the strange, living heat of her body. As they began to walk toward the opposite side of the ridge, she suddenly squeezed his arm, stopping him. She looked into his eyes with an intensity that made him pause. Then she reached out and placed her hand lightly against his chest, right over his heart. For a brief instant, the warmth returned, and with it, a different vision. This time, Ravi saw himself through her eyes, standing in the forest, his hand pressed over her wound, refusing to leave her. And along with the image came a feeling, something like trust. When the vision faded, she lowered her hand. No words were spoken, but Ravi understood the message. She believed in him now. They moved on. The path grew steeper, leading up toward higher ground. From the top, Ravi hoped to see a safe place where they could hide, maybe a cave or deep grove. But when they reached the ridge peak, his heart sank. In the distance, past the swaying crystal trees, 3 dark figures were moving steadily in their direction. They carried strange weapons that glowed faintly at the tips. The woman saw them too and stiffened. Her grip on Ravi's arm tightened. "They're coming fast," he whispered. He scanned the area, searching for anything that could give them an advantage. To the left, a narrow slope dropped into a shadowy hollow between 2 cliffs. It was risky. The rocks looked loose, but it was their only option. "Hold on," Ravi said, guiding her toward the slope. They slid down carefully, the rocks shifting under their feet. The sound might have carried, but they had no choice. At the bottom, the hollow opened into a twisting passage lined with tall, jagged stones. It felt like a natural maze. Ravi led her deeper inside, hoping the walls would hide them from sight. When they finally stopped to rest, both were breathing hard. The woman leaned against a stone, her eyes half closed. Ravi crouched beside her, scanning the narrow entrance they had used. For now, they were hidden. But Ravi knew it was only a matter of time before the searchers found their trail. Still, as he looked at her, he remembered the warmth in his chest and the trust in her eyes. Somehow, that made the fear easier to carry. They were no longer strangers. They were connected. The hollow between the cliffs was quiet, but Ravi knew the silence would not last. The dark figures they had seen from the ridge were still moving toward them, and it was only a matter of time before they picked up the trail. Ravi adjusted the straps on his pack and looked at the alien woman. Her breathing had steadied a little, but her face still showed strain. The patch over her wound glowed faintly in the dim light, and he could see how much energy she had lost. "We can't stay here," he whispered. She looked at him and gave a slow nod, as if she understood without needing words. They began to move again, staying close to the jagged cliff walls for cover. The path twisted and dipped, sometimes narrowing so much that Ravi had to turn sideways to help her through. The crystal-leaf trees overhead grew thinner here, letting in pale light from the silver sky above. Every few steps, Ravi paused to listen. Far away, the low hum of engines still followed them, steady and unbroken. Sometimes he thought he heard faint voices, deep, harsh, and unfamiliar, echoing off the rock. The woman's steps were slow but steady, her long fingers gripped Ravi's arm when the ground was uneven, and he could feel her determination in the way she pushed herself forward despite the pain. After a while, they came to a narrow gap between 2 large boulders. Beyond it, the land opened into a shallow valley filled with tall grass that swayed in the wind like soft waves. The grass shimmered faintly in the light, each blade catching the silver glow of the sky. Ravi crouched low, scanning the valley. It looked peaceful, but the openness made him uneasy. If they crossed here, they would be completely exposed. Still, there was no other way forward unless they wanted to backtrack, and that would bring them closer to their pursuers. He looked at her. "We'll have to move fast," he said, making a running motion with his hands. She studied the valley, then nodded once, her expression firm. Ravi tightened the straps on his pack again, then helped her step into the tall grass. The blades brushed against their legs and whispered in the wind as they moved. The ground was soft, and each step sank slightly, slowing their pace. Halfway across, Ravi heard it, the hum of the engines growing louder. He glanced back and froze. At the far edge of the valley, 3 dark shapes had appeared. Even at this distance, he could see the faint glow of their weapons. They had found the trail. Go, Ravi urged, holding the woman's arm as they pushed forward. The grass parted around them, leaving a clear path behind, a path their pursuers could easily follow. The hum became a sharp, rising whine. Ravi risked another glance and saw one of the figures lift a weapon. A flash of blue light shot out, hitting the ground just a few meters away. The impact sent a shockwave through the grass, bending the blades flat for a moment before they sprang upright again. The woman stumbled, and Ravi caught her before she fell. "Almost there," he said, urging her on. They reached the far side of the valley and ducked into a cluster of crystal leaf trees. The thick branches hid them from sight, and the air inside was cooler and still. Ravi leaned against a tree, catching his breath. The woman rested beside him. Her hand pressed lightly to her wound. Her golden eyes met his, and though she didn't speak, he could read the unspoken question in them. What now? He scanned the area. The trees here grew close together, their crystal leaves making a soft ringing sound when the wind touched them. In the distance, he spotted a narrow path winding between more rocks, leading uphill toward what looked like higher, safer ground. "That way," Ravi said, pointing. They moved again, staying low beneath the hanging branches. The ringing of the leaves made it harder to hear the sounds of pursuit, but Ravi could still feel the pressure of being hunted. Every step felt like a race against time. As they climbed the narrow path, the ground became steeper and more uneven. Loose stones rolled under their boots, forcing them to slow down. The woman's breathing grew heavier, and Ravi could see her strength fading. "Just a little more," he said, though he wasn't sure how far they still had to go. Finally, they reached the top of the slope. From here, the land stretched out into a rugged plateau, far in the distance. Ravi thought he could see the faint shape of a cliffside cave, a possible shelter. But before they could start toward it, a sound behind them made Ravi's heart sink. The dark figures had reached the base of the slope. Their voices carried clearly now, low and harsh, mixed with the whine of their weapons charging again. Ravi glanced at the woman. Her jaw was set, and her eyes burned with determination despite her pain. "Come on," he said, tightening his grip on her arm. They broke into a run, or as close to a run as her injury allowed, across the rocky plateau. The open ground made it impossible to hide, but the cave ahead felt like their only hope. The hum of engines and the heavy footsteps behind them grew louder with every second. Another flash of blue light shot past, striking a rock just ahead and shattering it into glowing fragments. The woman flinched but kept moving. Ravi's lungs burned, and his legs ached, but he didn't slow. The mouth of the cave was growing closer now, its shadow a dark promise against the silver sky. When they finally reached it, Ravi guided her inside, moving quickly toward the back. The air inside was cool and dry, and the walls glimmered faintly with mineral crystals. They stopped near a bend in the cave where the light from outside could not reach. Ravi crouched low, listening. The sound of their pursuers reached the entrance, then paused. The woman leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her eyes found Ravi's in the dim light, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, silent, but united in the same thought. They were safe for now. But the chase wasn't over. Outside, the sound of boots on stone told Ravi that the hunters had entered the cave. The cold air inside the cave wrapped around Ravi and the alien woman like a thin blanket. The walls were uneven, dotted with sharp crystals that caught the faint light from the entrance. Somewhere deep inside, water dripped slowly, the sound echoing softly in the darkness. They stayed still for a moment, both catching their breath. Ravi kept his eyes fixed on the cave's mouth, where faint light spilled in. The shadow of movement crossed it once, then again. The hunters were inside. The woman shifted against the wall, her breathing still uneven. Ravi crouched beside her, speaking in a whisper. "We can't fight them. We'll have to stay hidden until they leave." She nodded weakly, though her eyes flickered with worry. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small light stick. It glowed softly in his hand, casting a pale blue circle on the ground. He used it to check her wound. The sealant patch was still holding, but the edges looked strained. Her silver blood shimmered faintly where it had leaked in tiny drops. Ravi frowned. "You've lost too much already." The woman's golden eyes studied him. Then she spoke a word he didn't understand, but her tone was calm, almost reassuring. She reached out, lightly touching his arm as if to say she was still able to move if she had to. From the entrance, the sound of boots echoed deeper into the cave. The hunters' voices rumbled in a strange language, their footsteps moving with slow, careful rhythm. They were searching. Ravi's eyes scanned the cave. A bend in the wall hid part of the back chamber from sight. He gestured to the woman, pointing. Toward it, they moved quietly, staying low. The crunch of their boots muffled by the layer of dust on the floor as they reached the bend. Ravi spotted a narrow opening between two jagged stone walls. It was just wide enough for them to slip through. He guided her inside, and they found themselves in a smaller chamber, darker, colder, and completely hidden from the main passage. In the dim blue glow of the light stick, Ravi could see strange markings carved into the walls. They looked old, like they had been made centuries ago. Curved lines and star shapes stretched across the stone, their patterns unfamiliar. The woman's gaze lingered on the carvings. She reached out and touched one of the star shapes, her fingers. Tracing it slowly, her lips moved, and though Ravi couldn't understand her words, her voice carried a note of recognition. "This place means something to you?" he asked quietly. She turned her head toward him and gave a small nod. The sound of the hunters' voices grew louder for a moment, then faded again as they moved farther down the main passage. Ravi took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. They stayed in the hidden chamber for several minutes, the air heavy with silence. The woman sat down against the wall, clearly needing rest. Ravi joined her, sitting close enough to keep watch over her wound. He took a sip from his water flask and handed it to her. She drank slowly, then passed it back, her fingers brushing. Isn't a brief, warm touch, even in this cold, dark place. That touch carried a spark. The same quiet connection they had felt before. Ravi decided to try again with names. He pointed to himself, Ravi. Then he gestured to her. This time, she seemed to understand. She placed a hand on her chest and said clearly, "Arena, Arena," Ravi repeated, testing the sound. Her eyes softened, and she nodded in approval. Now they were no longer just the human and the alien. They had names, and that made them something closer to allies. The silence was broken by a sudden sound from the entrance. A metallic clang, followed by sharper voices. Ravi's muscles tensed. The hunters had found something. Arena looked toward the sound, then back at him. Her expression was clear even without words. "We can't stay here much longer." Ravi turned off the light stick to avoid being seen. Darkness filled the chamber, broken only by the faint silver glow of her skin. It was beautiful, but it could also give them away. Without thinking, he pulled a thin survival blanket from his pack and draped it over her shoulders, covering most of the glow. She looked at him in surprise, then gave the smallest smile, one that held both gratitude and trust. The footsteps grew louder again, moving toward the back of the cave. Ravi's heart pounded. He counted the seconds between each step, his ears straining for any sign they were passing by. The hunters reached the bend in the wall. For a tense moment, Ravi thought they might turn into the narrow opening, but a voice called from the main passage, and their footsteps shifted away, growing fainter. He let out a slow breath, relief washing over him. But the danger wasn't gone. The hunters could still be outside, watching the cave entrance. Ravi looked at Arena. "We have to move at night," he whispered. She nodded, her gaze steady despite her exhaustion. They waited for what felt like hours, the cave growing colder, as the light outside dimmed. When the pale silver glow of the moonlight faded almost completely, Ravi decided it was time. He helped Arena to her feet, making sure the blanket still covered her glow. They moved quietly back through the narrow opening, listening for any sound. From the main passage, the cave was silent now, except for the faint drip of water in the distance. At the entrance, Ravi peered outside. The valley beyond was dark, the tall grass moving gently in the night wind. There was no sign of the hunters, but he knew they could be nearby, hidden in the shadows. He turned back to Arena. "Stay close to me," he said softly. She gave a firm nod. Together, they stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the hidden chamber and the strange carvings behind. The chase would begin again, but for now, they had the cover of darkness. And this time, Ravi felt something stronger than fear in his chest. It was resolve. The air was still heavy with tension after the last confrontation. Rian stood on the high rock ledge overlooking the alien camp. Below him, the tall blue-skinned people were busy repairing their homes, their glowing tents now dim after the night's battle. He could still see the faint trails of smoke rising from the burned trees. The alien woman, Nira, was seated near the center of the camp. Her arm, once torn and bleeding, was now wrapped in clean cloth. She noticed Rian and gave him a nod, a silent sign of trust. It had been a strange journey from fear to respect between them. Rian climbed down slowly. He wanted to talk to her. There was a plan forming in his mind, but it was risky. The enemy, the iron-faced invaders, would return. He knew it. They always did. As he approached, Nira stood, tall and calm. "You came," she said softly. Her voice was like wind moving through leaves. "We don't have much time," Rian replied. "They'll come again. This time, we can't just fight back the same way. We need to strike first." Her golden eyes studied him. "You want to attack them?" "Yes, but not with just weapons. With something they can't expect." Nira tilted her head. "Explain." Rian pulled a small device from his belt, a translator, glowing faintly. He tapped it. "They think you are only warriors of the forest, but you have something more powerful: knowledge of this land. If we combine your ways with my tools, we can surprise them." Nira glanced toward the other aliens. "My people will not trust human tools. They believe machines are cold." Rian smiled faintly. "Then I'll make the machines warm." That evening, under the soft purple glow of the alien night, Rian and Nira gathered both her warriors and a small group of humans from the nearby outpost. The humans brought scanners, mapping drones, and metal cutters. The aliens brought nets, woven from energy vines, smoke crystals, and silent boughs. At first, the two groups stood apart, watching each other with suspicion. Rian could feel the old barrier between them, a wall of mistrust built over years of misunderstanding. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I know you think we are different," he began, his voice strong, "but the invaders want the same thing from both of us. They want our land, our resources, and our lives. They think we will fight them separately and fall. But what if we stand together?" The camp was silent. Then Nira placed her hand over the cloth on her arm, the wound he had treated. She stepped beside him and spoke in her own language, letting the translator hum. "This human risked his life to help me," she said to her people. "He did not know if my blood was poison to him, yet he touched it. That is courage. That is the heart of a warrior. If we fight together, we can win." Her people murmured in agreement. One of the elders stepped forward, his long staff glowing. Faintly, "If you join with us, human, you must take the oath of the forest. You must protect this land as if it were your own blood." Rian knelt without hesitation. "I swear it." The elder touched his shoulder. "Then we fight as one." The rest of the night was filled with planning. Humans showed the aliens how to use small tracking beacons, while the aliens taught the humans how to hide without leaving a trace. The two groups began crafting trap spits lined with energy vines, false trails leading to explosive crystals, and decoys made from painted wood. Rian noticed how quickly they learned from each other. The humans were impressed by the aliens' silent movement through the trees, while the aliens were amazed by the humans' quick repairs and mechanical skill. By dawn, the camp had become a forge of unity. Rian stood with Nira on the ridge, watching. The sun's first rays touched the alien forest. "They will come soon," Nira said. "Yes," Rian replied. "And this time, they'll regret it." The sound of distant engines rolled through the morning air. The invaders were approaching, metal beasts moving through the forest. But they didn't know that every step they took was being watched from the shadows. Humans and aliens waited side by side, ready. The great exchange had begun, not just of tools and weapons, but of trust, courage, and survival itself. Rion gripped his spear in one hand, the small human pistol in the other. "For your people," he said, "and for yours," Nira answered. The first invader stepped into the trap. The battle for the forest was about to ignite. The forest was silent now. Ravi and Arena stood side by side, watching the dark shapes move slowly through the trees. The invaders had come again, just as they had warned. But this time, Ravi and Arena were ready. Their small band of humans and aliens waited hidden among the crystal leaves and tall grasses. Each person held their breath, every muscle tense. Ravi checked his weapon, a simple but powerful tool built for quick strikes. Arena held her bow, her golden eyes sharp and steady. The invaders moved carefully, their armor shining faintly in the moonlight. They carried strange weapons that hummed softly. "Ready to fire," Ravi signaled to the others. It was time. The first trap was set, a pit hidden beneath a thin layer of grass and leaves. One of the invaders stepped forward, unaware. With a sudden shout, Ravi fired a flare that lit the sky bright red. The invader froze for a moment, then fell into the pit with a surprised cry. Arena let loose an arrow, silent and swift, striking another invader before they could react. The forest exploded into action. Humans and aliens worked together, moving quickly and quietly through the shadows. Smoke crystals lit the air with gentle blue smoke, hiding their movements. Ravi saw one invader raise a weapon toward Arena. Without hesitation, he threw a net woven from energy vines. It wrapped around the attacker's legs, pulling them down. Hard, Arena moved close to Ravi, her breathing heavy but controlled. "We hold the line," she said, her voice calm. Ravi nodded. "For your people, for mine." The invaders were strong and well-armed, but they did not expect the fierce teamwork between humans and aliens. They stumbled through traps, fell into pits, and were caught in nets. But the battle was not easy. One of the hunters broke free and charged toward Ravi. Ravi raised his weapon, but the hunter was fast. Before he could fire, the hunter struck him with a heavy metal baton. Ravi fell, pain exploding through his side. He gritted his teeth but did not let go of his weapon. Arena saw this and rushed forward. Her arrow flew true, striking the hunter's shoulder and forcing him back. Ravi struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against a tree. "Thank you," he gasped. Arina smiled briefly. "We fight together." The battle continued into the early hours of the morning. Slowly, the invaders were pushed back. One by one, they fled through the forest, their weapons abandoned. When the last invader disappeared into the distance, the forest grew quiet again. Ravi and Arena looked at each other, both exhausted but alive. They knew the fight was not over forever, but this victory was theirs. The humans and aliens gathered, sharing quiet smiles and nods. They had done something important. They had proven that courage and trust could cross worlds. Ravi reached out and took Arena's hand. She looked at him with a soft smile. "Thank you," she said simply. "No," Ravi replied. "Thank you for trusting me." They stood together under the silver sky. Two very different beings connected by a single act of courage. In the forest, once a place of danger and fear, was now a place of hope.